We're going to get our geek on now and dive into the world of quantum technology. Quantum technology in financial services, the opportunities, risks, readiness and realities of this exciting new technology. I'm going to steer a conversation involving Cathy Foley, Australia's former chief scientist, John Heap, who's a quantum ambassador for IBM, Hari Janakiraman, who's the head of industry and innovation for transaction banking at ANZ, and David Rountree, a partner at Allens. Give them all a round of applause as they make their way to the stage. And let's talk quantum. Thanks so much for joining us all here. Let's jump straight into this. Cathy, former chief scientist. Before we talk quantum, what does a former chief scientist get up to? Do you hit the sort of chief scientist speaking circuit, or what do you do post being Australia's chief scientist?
Well, I failed retirement very badly. I think I'm busier than ever, but that's a mixture of multiple grandchildren popping up in the last 6 months through to actually being a unofficial champion, I guess, for quantum technologies across Australia because it's such a great opportunity. But also, involvement with looking at how we can make, I'm on the CSIRO board, Bradfield Development Authority, things which I'm seeing as growing technologies and science into prosperity for the country. So I'm sort of focusing on that.
Let's talk about quantum. It is very exciting. We'll start from the very basics for people who've heard the Q word but don't really get it. Am I right in saying it comes from, we live in the world of the big, where things do big world stuff. If I throw a ball against a wall, it's always going to bounce back. When you get to the world of the small, the rules change a lot. What is quantum?
So I guess the first thing is to recognise that quantum has been around for a very long time, 100 years, and our telephones, our mobile phones, our lasers, LEDs, all these things are a consequence of the way that electrons move around in matter. What's happened since I guess the 60s has been the development of new aspects of physics where we can get in because of nanotechnology and control those subatomic particles and atoms in a way we couldn't before. And that's allowed us to realise new properties that gives us a multiplier effect on whether it's sensitivity or designing computers that are exponentially faster and being able to do things in parallel which you couldn't do with a normal conventional computer.
John, that's the exciting thing, isn't it? If we crack a quantum computer, whereas the chips in the computers we use at the moment are all just a series of 1 or 0, on or off, if individual points could be multiple things at once, the exponential piling up of that is we could build fantastically more powerful devices. How much so? What sort of things could we do if we do crack the holy grail of quantum computing?
Fundamentally, it's really allowing us to solve problems that classical computers aren't very good at solving. And it's problems in a number of spaces, but materials science, logistics, medicine, pharmaceuticals, large exponential spaces around algebraic problems. For finance, we're looking at problems around with complex heuristics like quantitative risk or investment management, or where quantum speed up can help compute with things such as fraud, pattern recognition and client analytics. It's basically the properties of the mathematical problems we can solve that the quantum computer lends itself to.
Hari, we're barely getting our heads around what AI could do in banking and finance, but when you look at the potential of quantum technologies, if we nail them, how can they revolutionise the space of banking and finance?
Sure, and good morning all. I believe quantum computing has the potential to significantly change the way we do finance, payments, and treasury. Now, I'll give you four very quick ways of thinking about it. One is the most obvious one. Everyone hopefully have heard about this. Quantum is going to break and make fraud and cybersecurity better. So the ability to analyze vast amount of transactional data flows in real time can significantly enhance how we manage fraud in real-time payments. So that's going to be a game changer. Cryptography, quantum cryptography enable quantum financial systems can be impenetrable. So that's another potential. John briefly mentioned this. So when portfolio analysis, Monte Carlo simulations, various types of analysis we do which are foundational in finance are computationally heavy. quantum computing and quantum algorithms can run them faster with more granularity. So leading to better risk, asset, price allocation decisions. I think that's going to be another game changer. If you look at how we manage liquidity, not just us, our customers, most of our liquidity management scenarios are stress tested based on batch processing. So quantum computing can allow real-time testing of crisis or impact, which will significantly change how we manage liquidity, but also how our customers manage liquidity. And the last one, and I can't be in this stage for those of you who have spoken to me, and John and I have a history on this, and blockchain. So there have been conversations yesterday regarding digital assets and currencies. Combining quantum and digital assets and blockchain is going to, again, make a big difference. For example, blockchain, for all its good, it is computationally heavy, it's consensus algorithm. So having quantum money, which can be fast, cash-like, on smart contracts running on blockchain can make it even better in terms of using the decentralized technology with faster payments. So a lot of potential.
And Cathy, I don't want to put a dampener on the discussion, but is there a risk we simply won't get there? Early days of quantum, we're manipulating individual atoms and all that. We've done certain small-scale things, but when you try and put those together in a chain of events, often the system, we say, decoheres or just falls apart because of errors upon errors.
Yeah.
I was speaking to an engineer recently who said, we've got the theory sorted, it's just an engineering challenge. Now, is that the case, or is there a real chance we just by definition cannot build a quantum computer and can never get there?
Well, I believe we can build a quantum computer because we're learning all the time. So although you said the science is sort of settled, there's actually more science being evolved. What's the best technique? If you look at globally, there's a whole range of different approaches. It's not like a single sort of quantum computer. And there's different approaches, and some are good for some sorts of calculations and some are good for others. There are quantum computers you can access now, which have got I think there's IBM's got about 1,000 qubits or something at the moment.
Well, we've demonstrated 1,000 qubits.
Yeah.
I think I've got it written down as 129 that you can actually use.
Yeah, and that's what you can access by just going onto the cloud. So you can get in there. There's D-Wave, there's Rigetti, there's a whole range. AWS runs a service to allow you to get to the right quantum computer to solve your problem. But these are the early stage ones, so they're operational now and they're scaling up. And with that error correction, everyone forgets that when we had classical computers back in the 60s, you know, with the ENIAC and that, there were lots of problems there, and they had to do calculations over and over again because there were errors. And we've got to the point now where no one ever thinks about an error in your computer. You believe everything that comes out of a computer because they are so error-free because of the development of engineering, to the point where, you know, we get I think they're getting down to sub-nanometer scale lithography, which is the bit which is sort of like doing the creation of a tiny device. Just to give you an idea of how big a nanometer is, your fingernails will grow about a nanometer in the next 5 minutes or so. So that's pretty small, and we can make devices that are that small. And that's what's based on the whole of our integrated circuitry. And we've got to the point where the precision is so great that we just take it for granted. That will happen with quantum as well. And if you keep in touch with all the quantum research that's going on in the world, which I love to do, being a bit of a quantum nerd, but also to see how exciting it is, when you have some of the smartest people in the world giving the resources that they need, they are just championing through all the different issues that are technological that lead into engineering. So I think we will have a full error-corrected quantum computer, a fault-tolerant one before the end of this decade, probably 2027, which is 2 years away, and then you know, fault-tolerant, complete error-corrected ones middle of next decade.
Okay, let me bring you in here, David. So it sounds like we are making genuine progress down this path. Previous waves of innovation and technology have shown us, if anything, we're not great at having the legal risk and regulatory frameworks ready to go when these these technologies come on board. It's going to be no surprise when we get there. We've got the former chief scientist saying by the end of next year. Can you guys get your act together and get regulation, law, etc., ready to go in this space? Or by definition, will we inevitably just be playing catch up once we've got the devices running?
No, I'll definitely sort it out.
Good.
No, I mean,
Thank you.
if you look at it, you know, I mean, we heard in the previous panel, you know, the discussion about there's contested ways in which we're even thinking about the best way of doing AI regulation, and that's where we're sitting right now with, you know, sitting right in the middle of that with a whole bunch of different examples. If you look at quantum, I mean, there's going to be a couple of different ways it's going to manifest from a regulatory and risk perspective. The first is going to be around, well, regulating the owners and operators of the assets that control that, and that's probably a bit less relevant for this audience, and that you're probably going to be taking, you know, I suspect the government will be probably ready because they'll be taking a lens of critical infrastructure, national security, you know, defence interests, you know, around that, and that's where you're the kind of best place to regulate the technology itself, because as we've seen, it's generally pretty hard to regulate a specific technology, but that is where you can regulate the owners and operators of the assets. But then, if you're thinking about it for this audience in particular, what you're facing is a series of incoming risks and opportunities. And you know where I think we've kind of graduated from our regulatory settings is the leaning towards kind of risk-based frameworks and technology-neutral frameworks that ask regulated organisations to look at where their operational risks are and plan and prepare accordingly. And that's, you know, we heard earlier today about CPS 230 kind of coming into force this month, and that's where we are. And in many ways, CPS 230 is a pretty good framework with which financial organisations will have to consider these incoming operational risks, you know, what it means for their encryption, what it means for their technology. And it's already on ASIC's agenda. You know, there's ASIC's corporate plan, you know, refers to them to undertaking more investment in supervisory matters for these types of emerging risks. So I suspect, you know, in that case, where we don't want to be is like, this is taking it a bit further back, but like Y2K, which, you know, I wasn't a practitioner for, but I remember.
I was there. It was quite the ride.
But, you know, you had this incoming cliff of everyone panicking, and in some ways we won't have the same like deadline of 31 December 1999 for the release of quantum, but you will have preparedness activities that need to take place. And I think what we can learn that we don't want to be in that position where the last 6 months to 12 months is this panic of a cottage industry of quantum preparedness. We've got a roadmap, we've got a time frame, and therefore we can learn from those and be prepared accordingly.
So, John, Cathy's saying you can already hop online, go to the cloud and do some quantum stuff. What can you already do? Now, what sort of use cases or problems being solved can quantum work on at a practical level now, given the comparatively limited size of the devices we're talking about?
So a lot of what I see at the moment, and there are banks that are working on it. I've got HSBC, Credit Mutual, Mizuho as examples that are working, certainly with IBM, around certain use cases in quantum. Others, it's around training and education. There are people actually teaching themselves how to code a quantum computer. I'm going to get on my little sort of soapbox here and say, and I recruit graduates for IBM, a little bit off-piste, and those guys coming out of university don't know what a quantum computer is, and they don't realise that coding for a quantum computer, making use cases real, is quite different from a classical computer. So that's an area which I personally am very passionate about. But a lot of use cases are emerging, obviously, in the materials science, chemistry kind of domain. And that doesn't surprise me because the people doing the research into the implementation of quantum computing come from that area. But I would actually put a challenge out to this audience, which is that, you know, if anyone is likely to gain the most from the returns on quantum-driven use cases and has the resources to invest in investigating them, it's probably banks, and particularly Australian banks.
Okay. Hari, we had Bronwyn Yam from Cuscal said yesterday on a different sort of technology in the payments platform, but great for the good guys, but great for the bad guys too. We've talked about some positive use cases. You touched on this slightly. What are the things we have to be wary about and policymakers have to be right on top of as the potential worst use badly motivated actors could do if they got online with these technologies?
The most obvious one, and the things we need to really think about is the bad actors can hack and extract data now which is encrypted, but then de-encrypt them using quantum technologies later. I think that is something which we all need to be acutely aware of in terms of how do we counteract to that? How do we ensure that we keep higher standards in terms of protecting our existing data and our customers' data and privacy, noting that what may be secure today, even when someone takes it, saying, yeah, you can't encrypt it because it's all hashed. That may not be true in the future. So that's number one, I think, in terms of what you can do. But also, like every other technology, unfortunately, sometimes bad actors, because they don't necessarily have the guardrails like we all do, can take shortcuts to achieve certain things, and we need to be prepared in terms of that is going to happen, and it's happened in the history, it's going to happen again. It's about being prepared, thinking about how do we tackle those scenarios when they come about.
Because it's a challenge, isn't it, David? We know already there's cases where hackers and online bad guys have seized a cache of data, certainly stuff that remains viable long term, military secrets and things like that you can't currently hack into. The algorithms there are protecting them. But if quantum comes online, the current pre-quantum algorithms we use to protect this stuff won't be useful anymore. Correct. So there are people hoarding data already that's sort of locked in a safe, waiting for the blowtorch to be invented to crack that. So how do you advise people on cybersecurity at the moment in this pre-quantum world, when the post-quantum world will fundamentally change all the rules?
Yeah, well, I mean, the risk you talk about there is a latent risk, and in some sense, there's nothing much we can do about that risk. But there's kind of, for now, there's how you're protecting until you transition to post-quantum encryption, and then there's actually the process of translating to post-quantum encryption. And from a preparedness perspective, it's a pretty clear roadmap for doing that. We've got a timeline. 2027, that's earlier than someone, other things that I've read, but that's, that's when I looked at Signals Directorate Information Security Manual on encryption standards, they are advising transitioning to a certain number of post-quantum encryption algorithms by 2030. And so basically all of the existing encryption standards that are used by, most financial institutions will no longer be viable by 2030, and so what that means from a preparedness perspective, and this is a known risk, this should be something that's effectively on the agenda, and what does that look like practically? That's understanding what the encryption standards you have in place, audit, preparedness.
Can I just jump in there just for clarification? So by 2027, the Australian government's contracted PsiQuantum to have a fault-tolerant quantum computer here, and they're looking to have one in Chicago as well. And that won't necessarily be successful with running a Sure algorithm, which is the algorithm that unpicks classical encryption now. Could do it, but it might take a very long time. It's really the middle of next decade is when you've got the full error-corrected computer that we've really got to be concerned. So we've got a bit of runway, but you can't be complacent because, as you said, Harry, that we can have still now decrypt later. And the other is also, you've got post-quantum encryption, which is using classical algorithms that are already being embedded in some of the software you buy already, because the US the previous president had actually put an executive order in to say different companies have to have things in place by a certain date, otherwise they'll be in trouble. Australian Signal Directorate's following suit. But there's also a quantum way of actually having unhackable encryption, which is called quantum key distribution and quantum random number generators. And Australia actually has one of the leading companies in that, Quintessence Labs, which spun out in 2007, one of the first quantum spin-out companies in the world. And they're supplying quantum-based solutions as well as post-quantum encryption around the world. And everyone should know about Quintessence Labs because it's an Australian phenomenon.
I feel like I've just watched you at university get an extension from your lecturer because you thought this was due by the end of 2027, but now you've got until 2035 to get your house in order.
At the very least, the ASD is saying 2030 is by the time you should have transitioned away from the existing, and you already have existing post-quantum encryption algorithms that is being released by NIST last year.
So IBM would claim 2029, but past performance is not an indication of future performance. I think that's what the caveat I should put there. So,
Cathy, you mentioned Quintessence, and because we've got into the dark stuff, let's pivot to some of the good stuff here, because you look at these technologies, the expense, how complicated they are, and you could imagine it's really only a few places in the US and maybe somewhere in the EU that it's happening. But in Australia, without overworking the cliche of punching above our weight, the stuff that we do, Michelle Simmons at UNSW, the Sydney Nano Lab, PsiQuantum in Queensland, so we're having a profound impact in these technologies in a way that is disproportionate to the amount of financial and human capital we're bringing to it.
Yeah, look, this is an extraordinary success story. I'm a physicist by training, and this is something I'm very proud of, is the Australian physics community really got behind and focused on quantum technologies as one of the main areas. And so Australia internationally, remember we're 0.3% of the world's population, and yet we're probably 5th or 6th in the world in quantum research. Sydney is one of the top 5 cities, I think it's 3rd or 4th as quantum cities, where we've got so much capability here with the universities, startups, workforce, and then it's almost like you've got photonics-based quantum up in Queensland. You've got silicon-based quantum computing here, because it's not just Michelle Simmons' silicon quantum computer, but you've also got Dirac, which is a spin-out from Michelle's company, which is Dirac Quantum Computer, which is also charging ahead really fast. We've got error correction here with Q control. We've got the biggest collection of algorithm developers here, and we've got the university sectors where Sydney, UTS, UNSW, Macquarie are absolutely world leaders in quantum. So it's a pretty special situation, and what we've seen is successive governments really backing this. So it started with Scott Morrison as the Prime Minister. I remember I was appointed by him to begin with, and I sort of said, quantum's really important. He said, okay, we're all in, and then...
Take us to that conversation, because with the greatest respect to the former Prime Minister, he doesn't strike me as a particularly quantum type of guy.
I'm a good salesperson, obviously.
Yeah, because I presume it's a matter of the quality of the advisors they have around them and trusting and going, if you say so, I'll back that.
Well, it was really interesting. It was during COVID, of course, so we were having a video hookup and he was stoking the fire in the lodge and said, this is a great opportunity for us. CSIRO had done a roadmap that showed the economic opportunity and said that if we back this with a strategy, then this will be something which is worthwhile. And then, of course, there was a change of government, and the Albanese government, with then Ed Husic as the minister, absolutely ran with it and probably even put it a bit on steroids. So that 2 years ago, we launched the quantum strategy, and then they've gone through, and there's a whole branch of the Department of Industry, Science and Resources called the Quantum Branch. I've never heard of Australian government ever backing something in this way. They've invested in PsiQuantum, which, by the way, started off as a $3 billion company, is now worth $10 billion in 12 months. So I don't know about you, but that's a pretty good investment. And so that's something where we're seeing that as a flag to the world, saying we are super serious. And now we're building up the supply chains. Got startups getting to the point where PhD students in physics are looking not to join the university sector, but to spin out companies, which they are doing. And for example, in Queensland, the University of Queensland had a company that spun out from PhD students, and they just sold that company into another bigger company for $40 million. Now, I think that's a pretty good return on your PhD scholarship, which is pretty crap. And so it's something which is really changing the way we think about it.
John, I'm familiar with this stuff. I was lucky enough to be the ambassador for mathematics and science at the University of Sydney when they launched their nano lab. And what people need to know is the machinery you need to work here is so mind-blowingly sensitive and precise. When they were building this lab at the University of Sydney, the devices you'd be using there that were manipulating individual atoms and things like that were being affected by the rumble of trains passing through Newtown Station more than a kilometre away. So you're designing a lab that's not going to be affected by a train in a neighbouring suburb. So the major lab there is a box floating inside another larger box, dampened down, sitting on not the normal 50 centimetres, but something like 2 metres of concrete. In the main lab, you can exhaust all the air and replace it every 6 minutes without creating any breeze or crossflow. It's temperature controlled to within 0.05 of a degree, right? So that's amazing. Does that mean that if we do crack these things, they'll only ever be giant, incredibly complicated machines? Will I ever have one on my phone? Will I ever have one on my watch?
I'm going to give several answers to that.
Reasonably quickly, if they're several,
very
but fire
quickly,
away.
very quickly. First of all, taking all that and encapsulating that in an environment that then can be deployed elsewhere has been done. That's what IBM's done. So an IBM quantum computer can sit in a normal office, but inside its kind of fridge thing is all of that stuff going on to protect it. Very, very low temperatures, 100th of the temperature of outer space, 15, is it millikelvins or something like that, because we're using supercomputing qubits. So, superconducting, sorry. But the way the first place you'll see it is as an API, as a cloud-based API. And therefore, you will see it on your phone. You'll see the use of quantum computers as a cloud-based API. I think a lot of the work that people like Michelle Simmons and people like that are doing may one day lead to a room temperature. But the room temperature's flipping hot. I mean, but by the universe's standards, it's pretty warm in a room. And your pocket's even warmer. Well, mine is anyway. And certainly, but maybe one day that will happen. So in your watch, no. Using APIs to a quantum computer, absolutely. I just wanted to point on people as well. We export talent as well. So the head of quantum, the guy that's making our roadmap deliver, is Jay Gambetta, and he's a Queenslander. So yeah, we export talent as well.
Harry, will every bank need a quantum expert, or will they just be inbuilt into machines and normal interactions? So even though we don't understand the science behind it, I can fully harness the technologies that are using it.
I think the answer is going to be mixed. So you will, like what we are seeing in AI, and previously I've seen other technology, you will have, if you want to call it an evangelist, an expert who's promoting all this in the bank. But large-scale adoption, we need to bring it down to the people who are at the coalface, and how do they use it. So it has to be a big mix of both. Fantastic.
I'll start here to wrap this up and go down the end here. It's 5 years from now. We're at Ausbanking 2030, and we're having our quantum panel. What are the big ticket items that we're going to be discussing then? Each of you give me one each. What's going to be on the agenda for our discussion of quantum in banking in 2030? I'll start with you, David.
I think, for mine, it would be that it's actually not a surprise. It's already on an agenda in terms of a transition and a roadmap. It's already on a risk register. It's already been built into supplier due diligence as you're looking at your supply chain and what the encryption risks are. So it's actually not a surprise. It's just part of your normal management of your future operational risk profile.
John, what are we talking about in 2030?
I suspect fraud will be, I mean, everything we've talked about so far, I think that will be where we'll be looking for the returns in better fraud prevention modelling around that.
Harry?
I think we'll be moving on to some real life pilots, especially on the payment space and analytics space. The other element to this is adoption of standards. So and how do we start thinking about standards when it comes to quantum, like we think about standards in everything we do.
Cathy, Australia's become a republic by then. We're lucky enough to get a bit of your time as Australia's first president. You pop on in and you tell us what's going on in the world of quantum in 2030. What's going to be headlining the agenda 5 years from now?
One of my post-retirement jobs is chairing the Australian National Standards Quantum Technologies Committee. So, and I'm the country lead on that, so you'll be glad to know quantum standards are being developed all around the world. But look, I think there's two things. One is that we'll be using quantum computers for doing the equivalent of Monte Carlo simulations, and with an exponential increase in speed, so that you'll be able to use that for optimization of just about everything you do in the banking, from the sense of optimizing your portfolio to working out who's being fraudulent, through to maximizing your investments and being able to do risk calculations.
And massively more accurate weather prediction, being able to model traffic flow in cities.
That's exactly right. And bringing, probably, if we are able to see the algorithms that are able to bring large databases coming together, that will mean that we'll be able to have the power of information which we currently don't have, being able to allow better decisions. And then I guess the other one is we'll probably be starting to talk about quantum money, so that we'll actually be getting rid of money completely, and we'll be having non-falsifiable, secure funding and using money in a completely different way.
Q dollars as such,
Yeah,
a Q economy.
That's right.
Fascinating stuff. Please thank our panel. What a great ride through the world of quantum. Our panel, Cathy, Hari, David and John, will be available during morning tea if you want to chat to them about anything that we have covered there. We're going to break for morning tea right now. We'll be back in about half an hour with a couple of fascinating discussions. Let's break for morning tea.